Hello, this is Mike at GameFromScratch, and welcome to week 3 of GameDev Weekly News. Quick recap of what happened in the world of game development for the week of December the 6th, 2015. Not a ton happened this week, but there were some interesting announcements. And then we're going to start with basically what started at the beginning of the week and go through as the week continued. Very first thing that happened is Microsoft released, very first thing is the very last thing. Microsoft released Visual Studio 2015's Service Pack 1. Not a ton in there. They updated the .NET Framework version, added some new languages to the editor, which I guess is a big deal to some, including Go, Java, Perl, R, Ruby, and Swift programming, which is a bit of a spoiler, but there's some Swift news coming out this week as well. Bug fixes, some new functionality, and to be honest, Visual Studio 2015 is a bit of a mess, so it definitely could use some service packs. So hopefully this makes working in Visual Studio a bit more stable, a bit more performant. Hopefully it's a nice release all around. I've already downloaded it and upgraded. No major problems. The upgrade was a little strange in that it looks like a standard feature installer. Don't change any of the settings, just take the default and go with it. Otherwise it gets mad and yells at you. But for the most part, seamless install, good experience. So a welcome release there. As part of that release, they also released TypeScript version 1.7. Now, TypeScript is Microsoft's version of a better JavaScript. Now, JavaScript is a neat little language. It was designed in something like 13 days, so of course there are going to be some warts, and there's a lot of warts. And what TypeScript does, along with other programs like CoffeeScript or Dart, is tries to work around some of those flaws, at least until the replacement ECMA script 6 can arrive on scene. TypeScript 1.7 added async and await calls, which is the .NET model for multi-threading, into TypeScript, but only for ES6 targets, or ECMA script 6 targets, so the next version of JavaScript basically. It added polymorphic this, which I think sucks and is one of the most terrible features of JavaScript, but I haven't figured out the scope or ramification of doing so in TypeScript. It also added ECMA script 6 module emitting, so you can work with their different module systems easily, and an exponential operator, which is the double or asterisk operator. Not a big change. The polymorphic this might be an annoying and a step back in my opinion, but I haven't looked at it enough to really give you an opinion. But those two releases sort of came together from Microsoft. I love TypeScript, by the way, and if you go to GameFromScratch, there is a complete tutorial series on using TypeScript with Phaser if you want a bit of a taste of what TypeScript is like. When it comes to dealing with JavaScript programming, I almost always prefer using TypeScript. It's a lovely language. And don't worry about it being tied to Microsoft. There are TypeScript releases. It's completely open source, and it's on pretty much every platform ever made, including the full tool chain. So it's not tied or proprietary like a lot of Microsoft products were in the past. So if you haven't checked out TypeScript, definitely do. It's a very cool little programming language. Now moving on from that, Corona Labs, the makers of the Corona SDK, a Lua-based 2D mobile game platform, they were picked up by the company Perk, which is weird because Corona Labs, I swear they were just acquired a few months back by a different company. But basically Perk makes mobile rewards for, so basically it's a reward app for shopping, etc. It's sort of like a loyalty program provider, and they make an SDK, etc. So they picked up Corona. They're going to incorporate their products together. According to them, Corona SDK developers are going to be relatively unimpacted, or this actually could be a good thing. So we'll wait and see how that turns out. But if you're a Corona developer, you definitely want to be aware they were just acquired by Perk. Again, we don't know the exact ramifications of this, and if you've never heard of Corona, it was very, very, very popular a couple of years ago. A lot of big name 2D games were made with it, but it's a Lua-based, very quick to work with, previously proprietary and commercially sold, but now free game development library with a bunch of plugins available for various different features, etc., like in-app purchases, analytics, etc. So if you're interested, definitely if you like Lua and you're working on mobile 2D games, you should check out Corona. It's a cool project, completely free now, and now owned by Perk. But what their future holds, who knows? Next up is Paradox. Renamed their incredibly poorly named Paradox game engine to I'm going to guess that's either Zenko or Zenko. Not sure exactly what that means. It's based on Japanese word. Where did I have this written down? Yeah, Japanese character signifying perfection and light. Now the reality is Paradox was a very misleading and confusing game engine. There was a very well-known PC game developer called Paradox Interactive. And whenever I did any news on Paradox 3D, everyone always assumed I was talking about Paradox game engine for their particular games. So the move is a good one, but it could cause some confusion, especially if it impacts their code. Now, I've done a complete Paradox 3D tutorial series. It's a cool engine. It's a it's a C# based engine. You can get into it completely free. Very solid graphics. The company behind it, Silicon Studios, was actually a spin-off of Silicon Graphics Japan. So they know their graphic stuff, and they've been making middleware tools for years. So if you find yourself in the market for a high-end alternative to Unity, and you definitely like the C# workflow, you should make a point of checking out Zenko. There are tutorial series, that's what I was mentioning, on GameFromScratch. Still just as valid. So basically it's just a branding change at this point. They also had a very mild release, but the truth of the matter is there was almost nothing in it. The major release is coming in a few weeks. So Paradox 3D is now Zenko, or Zenko, or Zenko, I imagine that's how that's pronounced. That's about that. Now next up, Blend for Web. They make a product that enables you, basically it's a game engine, I suppose you could think of, that sits inside of Blender itself and enables you to author games, applications, etc. for the web in Blender itself. So you use Blender, Blender's tools, Blender's programming, etc. to make HTML5 based games. They just released a new version, initially adding support for WebGL2, a bunch of logic changes and graphics changes, etc. So if you're interested, definitely if Blender is part of your workflow and you're looking at bringing your Blender content to the web in a programmatic manner, check out Blend for Web. They just released version 15.11. Next up, Autodesk just released Extension 2. This is their interim release between annual versions. So obviously they're branded as 2016, so we're not going to see a new version until at least 2017. So they add extensions basically to add new functionality as you go. Improvements in the max creation graph for computational fluid dynamics, some advanced stuff here. Send to print for Autodesk 3D printing, texture changes, etc. So if you're what the hell do they call their program? I forget, but if you're an Autodesk subscriber, basically you should have already got this. But they're adding new interim functionality to 3D Studios Max. Next up, Xamarin released a port of Urho Sharp. Urho, I don't know, it's a Finnish fish, so forgive me for not knowing the pronunciation. But Urho 3D is a C++ based cross-platform game engine, scriptable, pluggable, etc. It's also the underlying engine behind the Atomic game engine. So it's gaining some fame as of recent. And I've done a complete closer look at game engine series on Urho on GameFromScratch if you want some more details. But Xamarin ported it to C#, which is very cool. Then they tagged their own license on it, saying that you need to use their toolchain to make use of this port, which is very not cool. But if you're already on Xamarin's toolchain, there is now a C#-based 3D game engine option out there for you, so that part is very, very cool. Just such a shame about that stupid license being thrown in the mix. It's available on NuGet. You can go ahead and download it. Hopefully Xamarin come to their senses and release it under a more open source friendly license, especially when they're porting an Apache based project in the first place, which is just a bad move. Poor form there, Xamarin, but good job on porting this library. So bit of a toss up on if that's good news or not. Next up, there was a developer. This isn't really a Microsoft release, but Microsoft are kind of the brains or the power behind the Babylon.js 3D game engine. And one of their developers just released a generator for it. So now you can download this. It's node-based, I believe. You can work from the command line to instance and create new projects. So you can get that from NPM, the Node Package Manager. And basically it's a scaffolding for quickly creating Babylon.js files from the command line. So that's a cool new addition. This is a bit of a weird one. There's two Sketch-based apps that released at the same time this week, and I'd kind of never really heard of either of them, and both news came in. Now, neither of them was a really big enough story to really bother with on its own, so I threw them both together, even though they're not directly related to each other. One is a project out from BC, my home country here. It's a research project on creating something called VPaint, which is vector graphics with time-varying topology. You can watch this video basically to see the effect, but it allows you to sketch animation in a 2D drawing. Kind of a cool project. You can go ahead and get that at vpaint.org. Very primitive at this point. There's not a lot of functionality there, but you can definitely see the potential of where they're going with this. Now, at the same time, though, Autodesk created, what did they call it? Project Draco, which is sort of like VPaint. It allows you to sketch animations as well. The big difference there is they're not open source, and they're, as of right now, looking for beta testers. So the sketch-based animation, 2D animation sounds interesting to you, head on over to, I'll link all of these stories down below, but head over to the story for this one, and there's a sign-up link if you want to get in on that beta. It's an iPad-only app for now, but if the idea of 2D animated sketching sounds good to you, check that out. Next one, probably the big news, probably the second biggest piece of news this week, is Apple released open source the Swift programming language. Now, the Swift programming language is a great thing, sort of. As it stands now, the official way to program in the Apple ecosystem is ObjectiveC. And not being objective at all, ObjectiveC stinks. It's awful. It's a terrible programming language. It's the worst programming language in modern use right now. And I say that without caveat. C++ is a better choice. Java is a better choice. C# is a better choice. Python is a better choice. I can keep going on. Basically put blank space is a better choice. It's more or less, it's been around forever. Basically pioneered by Next, which is the company that Apple ultimately bought to turn into the modern underpinnings of macOS and iOS, which is also why if you ever use their programming interface, all of the variable names start with NS, which is for next step. Just trivia bit there. But they committed to Objective-C in the early 80s, and it's a crap language that was kind of crap then, but brought some new stuff to the table. And this has been your choice. You know, you can use C++ or Java or whatever on these platforms, but the official Apple way has always been Objective-C. And I think even they started realizing that this language was at the end of the days. And being Apple, of course, they're not just going to adopt an open, already developed language because they're Apple. So what they did is they went out and they developed Swift. Now, Swift is a nice mashup of a number of different languages. If you've worked any time recently with a modern language, even TypeScript that I mentioned earlier, Hacks, ActionScript as it's evolved out. I'm trying to think of other languages. Ruby has a bit of the feel. If you've used kind of where languages are going, you will immediately feel comfortable in Swift. Now, when they first launched it, there were some glaring missing features, but over time they've kind of improved it, and added it, and now they've opened it up. And the biggest problem probably with Swift right now is it's Apple only. And it's Apple's ecosystem only. So for it to really be viable, for it to really replace C++, I suppose, as the language to choose to develop iOS software that will also be ported to different platforms, it needs to be on those different platforms. So hopefully this release will see that happen. Swift itself, compared to Objective-C, it is the perfect programming language. Compared to other modern programming language releases, it's decent. It's a solid programming language. I have no faults with it. Coincidentally, right after it was released, I did a tutorial series on using it with SpriteKit. It's a nice, pleasant experience, if I'm honest. Some of the interfacing back to the old Objective-C code underneath wasn't the best, but it was still a pretty seamless experience. And one of the big features about Swift is it's designed to slot into their ecosystem pretty transparently, and it does a good job there. So if you're an iOS dev and you want to get the hell away from the insane world of Objective-C, Swift is perfect for you. And once it starts getting ported to various other languages and becomes not just an Apple thing, Swift might just become a great programming language along with the other options. So this is a good step in the right direction. Now there's one other piece of, actually let's see if I have anything here. Oh yeah, one last thing there, and then one more final piece of news. Side Effect Software, which from my hometown of Toronto here, they just released a version of their software, Houdini, for Unreal Engine. And this is kind of an interesting piece of news because Side Effect Software's Houdini has never really been that game focused. Like, it's been used for making some cutscenes, and now this is a piece of software that has been used in AAA games, cutscenes mostly, motion pictures, etc. It's a huge piece of software in the professional CG world, but not so much in the gaming world. And I've tried to learn Houdini like 5-6 times. My brain does not grok it. It is a tricky way of doing things, but it's very procedural based. And if you think procedurally, you will love Houdini. And they've added a number of game related tools in place. So Houdini has an indie level package for people that make, I think it was $100,000 or less, for between $100 to $200 kind of thing. And then there's full Houdini versions as well. and this is available for all of them. So head on over to side effects. I think it's just sideeffects.com. Yeah, sideeffects.com, and check that out if you're interested. It's another option, slots perfectly into Unreal Engine and brings procedural game graphics to Unreal. So, especially if you're in the procedural world, big thing. Now, finally, the big story, which really isn't that big a story to be honest, is Flash is dead. And that's been splashed all over the internet this week, and I guess technically it's true. This week, Adobe killed Flash as a name. And it's been a long time coming, the longest time coming you've ever seen in your life. And what they really did is they killed off Adobe Flash, which is a product that's been around forever. Basically, it's the Flash authoring tool. Is now called Adobe Animate CC, I believe is the full name. And the big thing there is they're traditioning, so not only does it do timeline-based animations for Flash, but it also does them for HTML5. And the truth of the matter is, this product's been around for years. They're just kind of merging them together. So what the ultimate story here is the Flash creation tool is gone. And it's being replaced with Animate. No more future there. And if you haven't already figured out the writing on the wall about Flash, if this is a pun not intended, a news flash for you, then I don't know, you kind of been living in a cave, to be honest. Flash is dying, slow gradual death, has been since Apple went to war with Flash, if we're honest about things, but it was probably on its way out then. Almost none of the browsers support plugins going forward. Mobile kind of won the world, so plugins to browsers are dying. That's why you don't see the Unity plugin anymore. It's just not really a thing anymore. So the death of Flash was slow and inevitable. Now, don't get me wrong, Flash as a programming language, which we should probably technically call ActionScript, will still be around for a long time. Air, which is an embedded version of Flash for cross-platform development, will be around for a long time. Flash in the browser, it's been dying a slow death. So this is just really one step further. So if you're a Flash dev today, the Flash is dead means nothing to you. Compared to yesterday, nothing's changed. But what it does mean is going forward, your tooling won't be updated. So they're not focusing on you anymore. They're focusing on HTML5 going forward. But the reality is the majority of game developers I know at this point aren't really using that tooling anymore anyways. So it's a really grand sounding news story. Flash is dead, and there's a lot of people cheering, and yay, Flash is dead, and there's a few people mourning that, their livelihood is going away on this one and they have to move to something else. But at the end of the day, Flash is just as viable as it was yesterday, and Flash's viability is not as big as it ever was, but still quite viable. The truth of the matter is, these days now, Flash is sort of a programming language with a runtime, just like C# is with .NET added, or Java is with, say, Swing or Odd, or JavaFX or whatever. So it's really just another language combo at this day and age. So the death of Flash really isn't that big of a deal, but it was officially announced this week that Adobe Flash as a product is dead, and Adobe Animate CC is taking its place and targeting HTML5. So not really that big of a news story, but definitely worth mentioning. So that's it. That was the game development news for the week of December 6th. Hope you enjoyed that. Any story and every story I just covered here, I will put the hyperlinks down below in the comments, so if you want to see in more depth the Game From Scratch original news source, head on over. And don't forget, you can subscribe to Game From Scratch and get this news as it occurs. Just go on over here, click that button right there, and you will get the RSS feeds for the GameDev news feeds. Or, of course, you could just go to the site every day. I'd like that, of course. So I hope you enjoyed that. See you later. Bye.